All right, so being a chess player, I was curious about why people play games, why they make them happy. And so I picked up this book from the library called Reality is Broken by Jane McGonigal. Awesome book. So, first of all, we can identify two emotions that make us happy while we're playing games. They're not the full story, but they are flow and fiero. Flow is the experience of being fully engaged in something where you're working at the peak of your capability and you lose track of time. I've experienced this often when I played blitz chess in coffee shops or whatever. I can play all night long. The problem with this is that flow is not very sustainable. Like you can sustain it for a long time, but then eventually you have to come back to reality and the feeling goes away. It's just a mood, right? So we're looking for something more sustainable. Fiero is one of the most potent experiences you can have. It's when you overcome an obstacle, the bigger the obstacle, the better. And it's just this feeling of elation and you feel really capable and good. But that can get addicting. So we want something more than just feelings. One other thing to specify here is that happiness researchers like positive psychologists, they figured out over a long time that extrinsic rewards don't really make us as happy as intrinsic rewards. And so extrinsic rewards are things like, let's say you buy a new car and it makes you happy for a little bit, but then you run into something called the hedonic treadmill where you just keep buying newer and newer stuff because it gets old really fast. So the time-tested way to get happy is to look for things that are intrinsically meaningful. Intrinsically meaningful to you. They make you happy just for the sake of doing that thing, not for something else. And so Jane McGonigal lists like four things that games give us that reality doesn't provide us as well with. Number one is the opportunity for more satisfying work. So people think the opposite of work is play, but that's bullshit. So the opposite of play is depression. Depression is characterized by like a sense of pessimism about your own capabilities and a despondent lack of activity. If you take the exact opposite of that, you get a sense of optimism about your abilities and constant stream of things to do, constant stream of stuff of work, right? So we're actually looking for satisfying work. We're not trying to get away from it. The reason work sucks as it is in reality these days is because we often feel we're underutilized, first of all. So we're doing meaningless, boring shit like lifting boxes or something. So we don't feel used up. Number two is like we're working for somebody else. So we're kind of alienated from the products of our labor. We don't get the feedback. Like if I do something like, what did I create? What am I doing it for? There's just all these disconnections happening. What games give us is that they give you a clear goal, so you're motivated to do something, and they give you actionable next steps. So there's always something to do. She calls this guaranteed productivity, right? When you don't know what to do next, then it ceases to become work and it becomes a problem. And then you're worried about fear of failure, outside pressures, and so on. So we want to do work that we choose for ourselves voluntarily, like in games. Also, there's a difference between bad stress and eustress, which is good stress. Bad stress is we feel that the pressure is coming from outside and we feel out of control. Eustress uses the same mechanisms in our body, but the difference is that our frame of mind is different. So stress is something we're running away from. It makes us angry. We're trying to escape into like alcohol or food or whatever. But eustress gets us going, releases all these positive chemicals in our body like endorphins, epinephrine, whatever. So it's a good thing, right? So we're looking for more satisfying work. Number two, we're looking for the hope of success, even in failure. So depression might have evolved because it showed us places for misplaced optimism. So if the environment is truly outside of your control, your abilities are not quite up to par, you get depressed because this is an avenue of life you don't want to tackle, right? You're going to probably fail, so you feel depression. So in modern culture, we're sold all these unrealistic dreams all the time, so we're constantly in a sense of depression, right? Games are a break from that because they give you this she calls it urgent optimism. Like even when you fail, like 4 out of 5 times in games you'll fail, but the way they rig it up is that you immediately feel like you can succeed the next time you try. So I found this with chess. Like if I lose a few games online, let's say, my rating comes down and I play easier people, then I start winning again. So there's this like guarantee that you'll always be able to succeed if you keep at the task. All right, so there's that, the hope of success. Number three was social connectivity. So So, of course, there's the obvious thing where if you play games, you get to be with people and you derive the benefits of that. But there's also two cool things you mentioned. One is vicarious pride, where you take pleasure in teaching somebody else and seeing them succeed. And I think the word for that she uses is called naches. Like she borrows these words from other languages. So there's the vicarious pride when you mentor somebody else. I get that feeling as a chess teacher when I help somebody else succeed. Number two is she calls it happy embarrassment. So this is the trash talking. Like I do this with my friends a lot in chess too. We trash talk each other, and there's kind of an evolutionary utility to this because if you had to embark on projects that required trust, you often have to compromise yourself or put yourself in compromising positions with regard to others where they can exploit you. When you trash talk, number one, if I'm in a position of power and I trash talk, I put somebody down, but there's no malintent there and I don't go all the way with it, that establishes trust. It means that that person can trust me that I won't abuse the power over them when they trust me, right? And the flip side of that is if I'm in an inferior position and somebody is denigrating me playfully, that means they're not going to wield that power over me. And it's also me showing that I'm willing to be in a lower place in the hierarchy temporarily, right? Like humans are very attuned to their place in the hierarchy. So when you can mess with that with your friend a bit, that means you guys can trust each other and you're not trying to like always top each other, right? So that allows you to embark on bigger projects. Also, there's a thing called ambient sociality she talks about, where even if you're not actively engaging with people, just the sense that there are other people around you is a good feeling to have. And this is a kind of easy way to socialize for introverts, so that when they're in a game and everybody's doing the same thing, and there's like a million people online, there's a sense of being connected. There's a social expansiveness. And then there's also like an opportunity to communicate with others if you really felt like it. So it's a kind of a low bar for entry into socialization. So far we covered three things: more satisfying work, hope for success. Number three, social connectivity. These are all things that are valued intrinsically. They're intrinsic rewards you value for their own sake. You're not doing it to get something else. Number four, I think is the most important, is meaning. Games give us meaning. Now you might ask, like, games are bullshit. How can they give you meaning? Like, you quit the game, then you get gamer's regret. It's like, shit, what happened in my real life, you know? But the thing about meaning is that it's an emotion. So even if the game doesn't have value in the real world, it still gives you that sense of meaning. And the reason it does this is because meaning is the sense of being connected to something greater than yourself, right? We recognize these things when we feel awe. Awe is kind of like this feeling that gives us a hint that we're in the presence of something bigger. Like you get this when you're in the Grand Canyon or something. Not that I've been there, but that's kind of the sign. You feel reverential towards things bigger than yourselves. Games do this in three ways. They provide epic, well, first of all, the bigger the thing, the more meaning you derive from it, right? So we get this idea of epic. Games give you this epicness in three levels. Number one is epicness of context. The story they provide is something where you feel you can be of service to some greater collaborative mission. They give you epic environments. Like game designers spend like years crafting these beautiful environments. And number three is epic projects. You undertake epic projects with other people and you feel a sense of meaning that you contributed, right? Now about that epic environments thing, there's an evolutionary utility to these, probably she talks about. So for example, we see these stone cathedrals from like the Neolithic age. Really old, like massive stones they had to put in place and everything. And it's like, why did they do this? Some theories go that they started farming first and then they had the capacity to do these things, had the time and effort to make these elaborate structures. But it could very well be that it's the other way around, that seeing structures built by people like you, these big ass collaborative missions where they're building these temples and stuff, they show people what humans are capable of, and it's an inspiring feeling when you go there, and it makes you do even more stuff, makes you actually want to serve, right? So these epic environments are important in that they remind you of what humans are capable of when they work together, and it makes you want to be a part of that bigger thing, right? So, and one last thing I want to talk about with regard to that was, right, in this modern day culture, we're sold this individualistic myth where it's like, if you fulfill yourself, you'll be happy and shit, but it gets it wrong. The more you focus on yourself, the more you're going to be depressed and anxious. What we're actually looking for is being kind of having a sense that of our own smallness in the overall scheme of things, but that we can play a role, even if it's a small role, but we can contribute. The less you're thinking of yourself, the happier you're actually going to be. All right, so those are the four things that are intrinsically rewarding that games provide, that reality is not so good at providing just yet. But her whole idea in this book, and she goes on to talk about real ways that games are being transferred over to real life to make reality better. I'm not going to go into that other 2/3 of the book, but um, yeah, so the question is, how can we bring these rewards to real life? Like when I play chess, I can study that shit all day. Even when I read for my own sake, I can read all day. But when I go to school, it's like, shit, I don't want to do this schoolwork because somebody else provided me with that task, and there's a sense of fear of failure and stuff. So there's something that reality is missing that we need to work on. Like game designers have spent the last 30 years researching this shit. They know what makes you happy. The time is now to transfer these lessons over to making reality a better place, not something that we want to run away from into games. All right, thanks.